Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar, Nourishing Progress, Making Malnutrition Everybody's Business. My name is Anthony Hare, and I will be hosting you today, and it is indeed my pleasure to welcome you to what is a critically important discussion on malnutrition, which continues to be a persistent global challenge that affects billions of people worldwide and unfortunately hinders both economic and social progress. And despite a lot of progress that we have made in recent decades and years, malnutrition in all its forms remains one of the greatest barriers to human potential, with, quite frankly, devastating consequences for health, education, and even productivity across the globe. Now, addressing this challenge is not just the responsibility of governments or international organizations. It should actually be everybody's business. And we face really big challenges in traditional aid and development funding and financing today, which is why this conversation is really, really critical. We are here today to explore how stronger collaboration across sectors can drive sustainable solutions, can transform food systems, and can ultimately accelerate progress towards a healthier future for all of us. We are also at a pivotal moment. With the Nutrition for Growth Summit 2025 fast approaching in Paris later on this month, we need to seize this opportunity to drive collective action. We need bold commitments, we need targeted investments, and of course, a renewed focus on accountability to bridge the funding gap and create real, measurable change via improved nutrition. And that is why we have gathered a fantastic lineup of speakers and panelists today. Leaders who really are at the forefront of the crisis around nutrition and the efforts to address it. So I will quickly introduce our panel to you so that you have a better sense of who will be here today speaking to you and engaging in a dialogue. Firstly, Brieux Pont, who is France's Special Envoy on Nutrition and also the Secretary General of the Nutrition for Growth Summit that I just mentioned, happening later in Paris this month. He brings a wealth of diplomatic expertise and international policy leadership to a crucial movement of nutrition. We're also then joined by Anna Jacobian, the Chief Impact Officer and Executive Director for Nutrition at CIF, known as the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. Anna is a champion of evidence-based policies and impactful solutions to accelerate global nutrition progress. Then we also have Virginia Villar Arribas, the Deputy Director of Private Partnerships at the World Food Programme, who has dedicated her entire career to humanitarian operations, crisis response, and of course, mobilizing resources for global nutrition efforts and impact. Greg Garrett, the Executive Director from the Access to Nutrition Initiative, who has been a key figure in driving public-private partnerships within the nutrition ecosystem and accountability for many, many years to ultimately improve nutrition markets worldwide. Mauro Brero, Senior Nutrition Advisor for Food Systems for Children at UNICEF. Mauro brings over 15 years of experience in strengthening public policies to combat all forms of malnutrition. Adeline Lascan, the CEO of Nutriset Group, who has pioneered innovative, locally driven nutrition solutions that have really helped to reshape and have a tremendous impact on the fight against malnutrition. And last but not least, Yannick Fong, the Global Vice President of Nutrition Improvement at dsm-firmenich. And Yannick has been at the forefront of developing innovative nutrition solutions and ultimately forging inclusive partnerships that really need to drive impact. So we've got some real heavy hitters in the room with us today. And this session is not just about highlighting the challenges that we face. It's really about looking towards the solutions that can move us forward. Because ultimately, by working together, aligning goals, and leveraging the power of multi-sectoral partnerships, we can and will accelerate progress and ensure that nutrition becomes a fundamental priority for all and can deliver on the impact that we know that it can. So in advance, thank you for being here for this webinar. Let's get going. We're going to start with 5 short talks. And to kick us off with some opening remarks will be Brieux Pont, the Special Envoy for Nutrition, and of course, the Secretary General of N4G. So Brieux, it's over to you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me today in this seminar. Thank you to dsm-firmenich for the organization of this webinar. We're a few weeks, not even a few weeks, a few days ahead of the N4G summit. And it's never too late to, I believe, remind how appalling the situation of nutrition is in the world. We know that one third of mankind is actually suffering from malnutrition, and we also know that half of every child death is caused by malnutrition. We know also that malnutrition affects all communities, all societies, all nations in all its forms, uh, be it undernutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, overweight and obesity, or even denutrition among the elders. So this is a real challenge for us, not only from a human point of view, but also from an economic point of view. It slows down economic growth, and it's burden for future generations. So this is why I believe, and the French government believes, should be addressed as a top priority in the development agenda, both domestically and internationally, and even more in this time where international public development aid is under attack. It's not popular. It's being challenged by populist agendas that are putting in question, that are questioning the usefulness of development. What we see, the way we see this, is that in times where governments, for instance, the United States government is reconsidering their support to development aid, we need to mobilize ourselves. Because if it's about security, security doesn't depend only of defense. It also depends of development, so that resources are. I mean, every nation has access to the resources it needs without feeling the need of conquering or starting conflicts. And we know that malnutrition is not only a consequence of conflict, but also a cause. So in a world which is beset by multiple crises, nutritional security is, well, beyond food security, is a global strategic challenge that we need to address. We also know that nutrition is at the crossroads of many areas of expertise, and that makes it at the same time strong and weak. Weak because people struggle to define what really nutrition is, and strong because you can actually include a lot of different areas of knowledge, as I said, of expertise, and deliver a very highly performing development policy. And we know that the return on investment is extremely high, unequaled, unprecedented among development policies. So it is really a privilege to be spearheading the international efforts for a mobilization in favor of nutrition. As you know, we will, as you know, we will host this summit on the 27th and the 28th, bringing together governments, international organizations, civil society, philanthropies, academia, and of course the private sector, which is absolutely key in that regard, which with its capacity of creation, of innovation, of investment. Um, Not all companies will be able to participate. As you know, there are very strict rules and principles of engagement for N4G. I'm glad that dsm-firmenich and Nutricid, for instance, are among the companies that can participate to the summit. However, we need to remain open to dialogue with those who are not yet compliant with our principles, and who could benefit from being on the good side of history. So we'll be open to dialogue with them. As I said, the private sector has a crucial role in that regard, very often very inspiring. So thank you for having me, and I'm excited about discussing this matter with participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Biru. That's great, and I have already quite some questions for you when it comes to N4G, but I will save those for later on. We're now going to move on to Anna Hakobian, again, Chief Impact Officer and Executive Director for Nutrition from the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. Anna's going to specifically focus on what a lot of us know, but some of us fail to really realize the impact of malnutrition, but also the opportunity with addressing it. Anna, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'll start by briefly maybe highlighting and reminding why a private philanthropy like Children's Investment Fund Foundation thinks it is crucial to invest in nutrition. We cannot get to any justice on SDGs if we do not address nutrition. When it comes to sustainable development goals, oftentimes the SDG 2, which is around hunger and nutrition, is cited as a key sustainable development goal for which we need to mobilize nutrition efforts. But I think what oftentimes we miss out on highlighting is that actually 12 out of the remaining 17 goals have really key indicators that are so relevant and crucial, again, in terms of nutrition. So nutrition is really a multiplier and is really a cornerstone for us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. It is also really, really important, and we already touched upon some of this, the socioeconomic returns of investing in nutrition are really, really significant. So a number of us have worked with the World Bank colleagues on what we call the investment framework for nutrition, which highlights that for every single dollar invested in nutrition, the returns are $23. So again, a very substantial economic argument and case in terms of investments in nutrition. And we've already been through some of the statistics which are really convincing, and I'm not going to go through them right now. I know several of my colleagues will pick that up. So hopefully we're all pretty aligned and pretty sure why we need to invest in nutrition. Now, I want to address a little bit the question of how. What from our experience of working in this field has been working? What do we see as some promising opportunities and approaches to addressing, malnutrition? One, we really want to double down on preventative approaches. Treatment is very important, but we know to really be impactful, we need to start earlier. So when we're talking about nutrition for children under 5, for example, it's really important to start looking at adolescent girls, at maternal nutrition as precursors. And we have now the science is out there, solutions are out there. There's a number of interventions that have been proven to work, from multiple micronutrient supplements for pregnant women to SQLNS as really promising preventative solutions in addition to the treatment side of things. A second area that I wanted to highlight is integration. So with the WHO guidelines, we really now have an opportunity for a much larger and much more central role for community health workers in helping us address nutrition. And this really is so important because it provides us with opportunities to integrate with other health interventions. We know that communities and people don't experience their life in vertical silos, but sometimes the way development aid is organized, it appears as if they do. This is highly inefficient, not only for the donors and governments and the scarce resources that we have, but importantly for the communities we're serving, because we need to make sure they can access multiple points of service at one touch point. And the community health worker platforms provide such a wonderful opportunity for integration. We've started already some of these integrated approaches. SIP has been partnering with Gavi and UNICEF through the Child Nutrition Fund to really help integrate provision of nutrition with immunization services, for example. And we're looking at similar approaches around malaria and other health service provision. And the third and last point that I wanted to highlight in terms of approaches and hows is the topic of collaboration. We can only do this in a collaborative coalition building approach. Collaboration comes in different forms and shapes. There's multilateral opportunities, so coming into collaborative funds, which again helps us avoid duplication and harmonize our efforts around nutrition, but also collaborative mechanism and match funding and incentives, such as through the Child Nutrition Fund, to really help unlock domestic resourcing and funding into nutrition. And we're seeing some really brilliant examples of some domestic governments stepping up and really coming to the table with domestic matches for essential nutrition services. Collaboration with private sector, again, hugely important, not only because of opportunities to really standardize and improve the quality of the nutrition commodities, but at the same time as well working on innovations and really understanding the consumers. I think we need to start looking at communities we serve not just as beneficiaries but as consumers with the right to demand high quality at reasonable competitive pricing and be able to choose the products that fit their needs and their lifestyles to achieve the nutrition gains that are needed. So with this, I will summarize my speaking remarks, and I very much look forward to the panel discussion and to engaging with colleagues on this webinar and beyond at the Nutrition for Growth Summit, which SIF is very excited about and very proud to be participating and helping organize together with Hook and others. Thank you, and over to you, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Anna. You also gave me a couple of questions specifically about local innovations in local markets, but I'm going to, again, hold myself until the end. We're now going to move over. Virginia is here. Virginia is very actively involved in private sector partnerships from the side of the World Food Programme and has a lot of experience in the field, but also working across sectors to focus on malnutrition. So Virginia, over to you as well.
Thank you, Anthony. Yes, I think the most important thing that I wanted to convey to you all is that today, with malnutrition being one of the world's most pressing challenges, and with such a magnitude and such a scale, the most important thing is that it's urgent to give solutions and responses at scale. And that's also why with the World Food Programme, we work at a big scale. We are the largest humanitarian organization fighting hunger in the world, and we cover last year 153 million direct beneficiaries. We work with 23,000 staff and in 120 countries. And just in nutrition, out of these 152 million people, we covered 80 million people with interventions on nutrition, and again, all together with other actors. But within that, over 28 million women and children benefited directly from these nutrition interventions, treatment or prevention programs. And how do we do this? We do that through multi-sectoral approaches, using our different programs to tackle nutrition from all different angles. One of them is we fight malnutrition through humanitarian emergencies, providing supplements, but also in different ways, anticipatory action before the emergency and when the emergency happens. Then also fortification. We know that fortification is one of those solutions that can tackle things at scale. And last year at the World Food Programme, we distributed 1.3 million metric tons of fortified food, which is the equivalent of about 3 billion rations, or 17 million people for 6 months. And we do that as well, supporting national nutrition systems. As Anna just mentioned before, this is extremely important. We are only there to support the national systems to become stronger and to leave whenever that happens. And we do that, for instance, on fortification with supporting legal frameworks. Last year, for instance, we covered 40 countries supporting and strengthening national fortification systems. Also with legal frameworks, supporting strategies, trainings, and others. Another area is promoting nutritious diets. And I know that many of the people that are speaking, that are listening to us, and those that are speaking are working on this area. But it's about promoting diets and shaping social forms through social and behavior change communication, through work with the communities, so that they have different habits that bit by bit support healthier choices of food, cooking practices. And we also work within the countries with the national health systems, and that more also with the communities identifying and helping identifying and tackle malnutrition before it happens, preventing malnutrition. And perhaps just to say, we also support with the different programs, using programs like the school meals programs where we feed 107 million children. We use the school meals programs because this is a moment when children can learn diets and healthy diets and adopt habits that will stay with them for life. And that is, that multi-sectoral approach. We also, in our work with social safety nets with the countries, obviously, with supply chains and providing food all over the world, working with retailers and also with private sector. The idea is create a ripple effect also on retail markets, attracting private sector investment, but also encouraging that the markets adopt these things long term. And let me finish by providing some examples of collaboration, because these we can only do it. The problem is so big that we can only do that together, and that we will only succeed together, as Anthony and our colleagues and Anna has also said. And we work on cross-sector partnerships. Obviously, we work with different governments, but it's not only because it's the right thing to do, but it's also economically beneficial to do work on nutrition. And perhaps just one figure, I wanted to mention one figure, which is that childhood stunting, the cost of childhood stunting for the private sector amounts to 135 billion every year in low to middle income countries. And that shows also that an investment on nutrition is also an investment on everyone's future and also on economies. Maybe if you can help me with 3 examples on this slide that we can go through quickly. One is with a corporation, and I think we have one of the colleagues in this panel is since 2007 we have been working with DSM, now dsm-firmenich, and together we have been addressing what we call hidden hunger, with 40 million that have been dedicated to this. But what is most important is that this partnership has helped improve the lives of over 35 million people per year. And how have we done that? Is by driving innovation on this space, by supporting, as I said, the national system, supporting, for instance, fortification from the small farmer to the top, and also supporting the local production of the identification and production of nutrition on specialized foods that then were accessible to millions of people. As an example that we have there is that in Bangladesh in 2013, 30,000 people had access to fortified rice, and by the end of 2023 it was actually more than 14 million. So it gives you an idea of what we managed together to achieve in just one country, and that we did in over 20 countries. Let me give you another example, which is a little bit different, and that's where I was country director in Burundi. And this is the next slide, and it's about how together, actually, this is the Novo Nordisk Foundation. This is actually one example where we have a public-private partnerships, and this is with the Novo Nordisk Foundation that where we invest. We can do the Novo Nordisk, no worries. On the Novo Nordisk Foundation is an example where the public sector has actually joined the private sector in supporting a whole revitalization. So we are supporting farmers and we are supporting children through school meals and healthy diets through school meals. This is working now in 3 countries, and we are actually talking about an additional 2-phase. We have just signed a second phase, and we're talking about an additional 3-phase. But basically, Novo Nordisk Foundation is providing expertise and funding. The Grundfos Foundation is also providing expertise and funding, and then they have also brought in the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's a flagship public-private partnerships that is working at the moment in Africa, and that is growing and making incredible achievements. And let me give you one more example here about how to work also with supporting the local private sector, and that's the next slide. When I was country director in Burundi, which was just before this position as in headquarters, so basically we base ourselves. This is a country where at the time when I arrived, there were 58% of the children under 5 that suffer from chronic malnutrition, and there was a very, very limited milk and dairy value chain. So what we did is we based ourselves on the project that IFAD was implementing, where they were supporting cows, and those cows had calves, and then they gave it to the neighbors. So basically they were supporting the milk production, but there was no processing and no sales of that milk. So what we did is we identified, selected, and supported a local dairy factory, and ensured that there was the refrigeration, then supported them with the funding, with the infrastructure, with the quality support, with the expertise, and that was a combined effort. The Netherlands provided funding for the factory. We, together with an international dairy company, Kerry, provided the expertise, the quality control, and the expertise on processing. And then once this was there, we needed to work with the demand, and we used our program of the school feeding program that we had in Burundi with 660,000 children, and supported by the EU and France, we managed to encourage a demand of milk that people didn't really know, right? I remember when we gave milk for the first time in the small bags, children were saying like, what is this? Anyway, but basically at the end of these program, well, not end really, but after a year and a half or 2 years, we managed to revive that milk value chain in Burundi and have children that actually not only drank milk themselves, but actually brought their parents and families to drink milk. I see Anthony here. I will finish with one more example, but just let me just finish with here. That is, this created a whole value chain that provided value for the farmers, for the families, for the children, for the factories. But not only that, initially they depended on us only for the sales for the school feeding program, and then they became completely self-sustainable, and then they started exporting outside. Now, just to finish, and this one is not on the slides, but I just wanted to also show that there is also potential collaboration that I think Sif mentioned here. But for instance, one example with us is also since 2007, we have been working with the Gates Foundation on nutrition, but also in other things. And thanks to the support of the Gates Foundation, we have managed to get what we call MIMI. It's basically a mapping on micronutrient intake, which is essential, is unique, is information that is not there otherwise in different countries, and that it helps policymakers, governments also understand what are the trends of malnutrition and attack it even further. With this, and also with an accelerator that we have, an innovation accelerator that also the Gates Foundation supports, we have solutions that also have supported different farmers in different countries. We can talk maybe about those solutions, but I just wanted to stress the role of technology and innovation to facilitate, to make this more efficient. And then just to finish that at the end, basically what I wanted to say is that on nutrition, we need to work at scale. We need to work with multi-sectoral approaches. And the most important, we need to work together with all the different actors, because we all have a very unique and very important role to play. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Virginia. A lot of things to come back to, especially in local markets scale, and you mentioned innovation. I think this is critical for this space as well. We have Greg now on the line, and Greg again is from the Access to Nutrition Initiative. I would say really holding the food industry and the nutrition industry somehow accountable for what they're putting out there, and ensuring that the markets for nutrition are stronger. Greg, love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to start with a general observation on what we're seeing in terms of markets and nutrition, unpack it, and then talk about some of the emerging solutions. But first, we have to look at the context, and it's not all that positive, but there is silver lining. Firstly, the statement that we're using a lot at AT&I is that markets, whether it's financial markets or food markets, are often antithetical or the opposite of actually achieving nutrition outcomes, meaning affordable, diverse, nutrient-rich diets continue to evade most people, especially the most vulnerable. We measured last year what is the global sales of food products derived from healthier products, and only 34% of global sales around the world are derived from healthier food products, meaning 66% of sales are derived from unhealthy products. The silver lining here is that 34%, which is far too low, we all agree, it's at least up from 27% in 2021. Now that's very marginal progress. It's not enough. It's obviously an urgent area that we all need to work on to accelerate progress towards healthier food environments. But the other somewhat negative trajectory is that food retail now is growing fastest in low and middle income countries. And while that can be positive, brings food safety with it, et cetera, it also brings a lot of processed foods, which are often unhealthy. And the growth that we're seeing, it's between 80 to 300% food retail growth in low and middle income countries in the last 5 years, depending on the country, 80 to 300% growth. And new evidence last week was published by Deakin University that really ties those consolidated modern food retail to a growing and rapid rise of obesity and non-communicable diseases in low and middle income countries. And on top of this, we know that the least healthy packaged foods are actually sold in low and middle income countries. So we have, some major issues here. The World Bank says the global financing gap for nutrition is about 13 billion per annum, and that's probably going up. So what are the solutions? The context around markets are not that great. How do we flip the script so that we rewrite the economics of nutrition, that we actually create a business case for healthy foods? Well, in 2 weeks at the Nutrition for Growth Summit, we're going to be releasing a document that we've been working on with dozens of public, private, and civil society organizations called the Paris Declaration on Business and Nutrition 2030. The intent is that it begins to talk about what is the 2030 roadmap that will help cross the sectoral divides and reshape the nutrition economy through a multi-sectoral approach, as previous speakers have just been talking about, and giving excellent examples of ways this is already happening. And what we're seeing is action items and commitments coming from government, coming from private sector, coming from investors, coming from the UN agencies, and also from civil society organizations. And I'd like to highlight 2 of them coming from the world of sustainable finance, which I think in today's current geopolitical climate is more important than ever. First, one of the commitments being made come from 7 of the largest institutional investors around the world. Together, those 7 represent $1.2 trillion in assets under management. And they are calling on food and beverage companies to disclose every year the percentage of annual healthy sales relative to unhealthy sales using an evidence-based nutrient profile model. And they'll be following up through collaborative engagement on those companies to make sure that they're moving towards healthier sales. And that's very exciting because it means we're starting to see financial markets take nutrition seriously and also hold companies to account. Second, there is a large Dutch institutional investor which has set aside approximately 100 billion specifically for impact investing for health, including nutrition. And I think that's a very exciting space because it means assets under management, pension funds, et cetera, are becoming a little bit more risk tolerant and are looking for opportunities in emerging markets to look for nutrition outcomes. So this is a new and very important way of using private finance to really improve nutrition outcomes going forward. There are also several food companies committing to more responsible marketing and healthier food portfolios. So, the negative is that markets are not at the moment incentivizing and ensuring affordable, healthy diets, but we're starting to see that trend change. And if we can all jump in and together work towards rewriting this nutrition economy, we'll start to see healthier food options that are affordable for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. My microphone, I think, is back on. Yes. Interesting. I've got a lot of questions as well because you're shifting, the private sector's involvement towards a healthier portfolio and what the incentives are. It's a question I have for you later. Before we get into the active discussion, last but absolutely not least, Mauro Barrero from UNICEF. Mauro is going to talk about a specific example that really talks about multi-sectoral collaboration and what the impacts can be. So Mauro, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anthony, and greetings to everyone. It is really a pleasure to be part of this important webinar today. And having the opportunity to present an innovative initiative, UNICEF First Foods Africa, which is about a principle-driven engagement with both public and private sector to tackle child food poverty, which is currently the main driver of malnutrition. Last year, UNICEF focused its child nutrition report on the issue of child food poverty, showing that today, globally, 1 in 4 children are living in severe child food poverty, and 1 in 3 children in sub-Saharan Africa is living in severe child food poverty, meaning that they are not able to access the nutritious and safe diets they need to develop to their full potential. So we are in the midst on a diet crisis for children, and UNICEF is responding by adding to its portfolio this First Foods Africa initiative with a vision to really transform the food system so that it is able to deliver the nutritious, safe, affordable, and sustainable foods that young children need to develop to their full potential. And this includes the food industry that, as we have seen from Greg's, Anthony's presentation now, it is not yet delivering the quality food that are needed. So UNICEF First Food Africa is articulated across 3 key pillars. The first one is to incentivize local production of these nutritious safe foods, working with Africa-owned medium to large companies to improve their access to capital, working with financial investors and capital investors to bring more money for the business of good foods, and also providing technical support to formulate and reformulate products. The second pillar is about policies, is about developing an equal playing field based on the highest possible food standards for food safety and food quality, and including the laws that we need, for example, for food labeling and food marketing to protect children's diets. And then the third pillar is about stimulating consumption through social marketing to make these nutritious and safe foods desirable and aspirational. Next one, please. But what do we mean when, next slide. Thank you. What do we mean when we speak about a principled engagement? So as I mentioned, UNICEF will engage with Africa-owned company. Last week, we launched an expression of interest, a request for expression of interest to over 1,500 companies in 14 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So countries are requested to fill the expression of interest, including by adhering to principle of engagement for a shared vision that is a vision for business and for the children. And also they have to certify about complying with some criteria of inclusion. For example, companies that do not adhere to the code on marketing of breast milk substitute, companies which core portfolio is ultra-processed food, or companies who interfere in public policies will not be able to engage in this initiative. And also if they are subsidiary of multinational companies who have this kind of practices. So companies will also be evaluated about where do they source the ingredients, the more local, the higher the score, also about criteria on gender and youth. And then after this pre-selection, they will enter to another phase where together with the United Nations Capital Development Fund and FMO, the Dutch investment, we are also assessing the financial viability of these companies and the quality of the business plan that they present to strengthen the business of the good and nutritious foods. The final selected companies, we hopefully will have a market at the national level or even at the regional level. This is why we target medium to large, will benefit from improved access to capital through an asset manager that will liaise them with financial investors who are interested in the business of good foods. And also they will receive technical support from excellent nutrition specialists to develop the products according to the quality and safety standards. Next one. And to conclude, the next slide, please. To conclude, I would like just to call the attention on two key features of First Food Africa. First of all, the financial mechanism for First Food Africa is the Child Nutrition Fund, where we collaborate with key partners, including CIF, who spoke before me. And the Child Nutrition Fund will provide to First Food Africa the funds needed for the programmatic implementation, but also attract investment from investment partner, capital investment, catalytic investment, etc. And also, the thing that makes this initiative quite unique is that it is a systems and it is a policy-based initiatives. So we are really working to frame the policies that are needed for a good and principle-driven business. And here I include a photo of a recently published strengthened food standards from West Africa. We work closely with ECOWAS and with member states to improve the standards that were quite weak in the region, and to make sure that they protect children from products that are too high in sugar, for example, or in additives that are actually harmful for children and the planet. So this is in a nutshell our First Food Africa initiative, and I look forward for more discussion in this panel. Thank you for this opportunity. And over back to you, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Mauro. A really good on-the-ground example, and it also gives me some questions, some food for thought. I'm going to invite all of the speakers and panelists to join us. There are two faces that were presented at the beginning, but we haven't heard speak. So when we open up this now panel discussion, I just firstly want to remind those of you that are watching that you can submit questions. We do receive them. I receive them in particular. So please do feel free to ask. And of course, depending on time, we will try to also answer a couple of yours as well. So the floor is definitely open to you. We haven't heard from Adeline Lescan from Nutriset and Yannick Fong from dsm-firmenich. So I'm actually going to come to you first, I think, to kick off this discussion. Adeline, the Nutriset portfolio, for those that don't know, is really focused on addressing malnutrition and has been doing for many, many years, as long as I can remember being involved in the field myself, working in the field in Africa, actually, where your products were available for those with severe malnutrition. Of course, your portfolio focuses on that, and malnutrition should be everybody's business. But it is a market, if I can use that word for you, that ebbs and flows, comes and goes depending on need, depending on funding, depending on natural disasters, conflict, etc. How does a company like yours manage to support itself outside of that constant malnutrition need? If the need goes down, how do you as a company find other ways also to continue to grow and to develop for your own benefit? It's a tough market out there. So give us a sense of what you do to be stable as the market that you serve constantly changes.
Thank you very much, Anthony. First of all, I won't say that the needs fluctuate, but really the demand fluctuates. So if there is enough funds, there is always enough needs. And so really we could work together to have less variable about the financing, because the financing is the main issue, but not only for a company like Nutriset or Plumpy Field members in the field, but also for all the program, and the cost of the program and efficacy of the program is really fluctuant with fund fluctuation. So I think it's really something specific to our environment. But more of all, I would like to say something also about what is needs and how to fight malnutrition when we are a private company. Of course, we can offer a nutritional solution, and when you were very little in the field, you already seen Plumpy Nut, and we all work with Plumpy Nut 20 years ago already. But the idea, and we all the panelists speak about multiplayer or multi-actors or multi issue things about nutrition and malnutrition. And I think that as a company, we also have a lot of competencies to work, for example, with government. We've got a very interesting project in Benin, for example, which is not only setting up plum peanut production, but really to work with the government to look at the agricultural system, the raw material available, and how we can transform that for first infant food or for school program, on how to work either by investing in the country, but also to work with local SMEs, for example, like UNICEF initiative. How can a company like Nutriset, who already set up and follow more than 10 factories worldwide and in specific country where we know it can be complicated to operate, how we can support the National Nutrition Initiative by supporting agriculture, by supporting the transformation of a good agricultural product into a good finished product for children. And usually there is a big gap here on how to transform this raw material. So we believe as Nutriset that today fighting against malnutrition and doing innovation on that is not only doing innovation on the product, and I think a lot of people are involved in the product, but now we believe that we should be more and more involved in terms of services and how to work with our competencies to help government to implement a national nutrition policy.
Yeah, you almost become with all the experience that you have, and I love the fact you mentioned Benin as an example. You really focus on local markets. The network that you have developed ensures also local capacity building, which I think is critical. So that almost this idea of local for local organizations, local companies can also support the local challenges that they have. Which makes me think as well then to this concept of collaboration. Yannick, you've been doing this for many, many, many years. You have been involved in various public-private partnerships across the world. You've been in various regions yourself as well. I think you and also Adeline from Nutriset are trusted partners, and there are many other companies that are involved in part and sometimes not at all. There constantly seem to be some barriers and concerns with engaging private sector. So from your perspective, from what you've seen and what you've learned, how do we best address those so that ultimately the benefits can be reaped?
Well, thanks, Anthony. And I think we should start speaking about PPPP, right? Private-public partnership, because it's just one opportunity to bring together companies like Nutriset, dsm-firmenich, and the public sector as well, right? So, I mean, you made me sound like a dinosaur. I haven't been involved in this field for too long, but still, you're right. And I may sound like a broken record again, but and Virginia shared, a bit more about the example about the dsm-firmenich WFP partnership. Which has been going on for more than 17 years now, and I think it's often highlighted as one of the best and most successful PPP, but it's one of a few only, right? So I think we need to really try to find a way to break down silos and encourage more of these cross-sector collaborations. And the collaboration between dsm-firmenich and WFP is a great example of how you can leverage each organization's strength to generate impact. And we need more of these. We need to be more ambitious. We need to be bolder and not afraid to try new things, right? So, as you said, Anthony, very rightly so. I mean, PPPs are really crucial in addressing malnutrition, but they also come with their own set of challenges. And one of the main barriers is still the lack of trust and alignment between the public and private sectors. And often, private sector is seen as not so welcome in nutrition discussions, despite being a key player in producing most of the food we eat. I don't sense we have the same type of challenges in other fields. If you look at immunization, if you look at the collaboration that Gavi is able to strike, when you look at access to vaccines, for instance. So in order to address this issue, I think we need to ensure that the private sector has a seat at the table in this discussion from the earliest stage. Clearly, we need to have clear principles of engagement and clearly define roles and responsibilities. It's also really important to have continuous dialogue and recognize when progress is being made. So I think many private sector players here want to be part of making food healthier and including nutrition in the debate, but they also see they also need to see the incentives of investing in nutrition, right? And I think that's exactly what Greg mentioned earlier. I'm quite optimistic, cautiously optimistic, looking at the potential outcome of N4G. I'm hoping we can see, public and private sector coming closer together. And I think the Paris Declaration that Greg referred to will actually be a good step in the right direction. So.
And it's a perfect moment to actually come to you, Greg. There was a question from the audience that, in fact, I had myself. You mentioned some very interesting and even alarming statistics. About a third of healthy food sales. This is a number that we want to see increasing. Why is the progress not strong enough or fast enough? What is behind that slow progress, and how are we going to be able to accelerate it, especially not just in markets that are developed or countries that are developed, but really around the world where malnutrition is at its highest?
This is why we exist, and very challenging question. But I think what some of the solutions would be around finance. And I'll break my answer up into 3 different stakeholder groups: SMEs, small to medium enterprises, one group; large food and beverage manufacturers, especially the publicly listed ones, another group; and then, what can government do as a third group? So Mauro, I think, gave an excellent example from UNICEF, showing how if you have patient concessional capital, affordable, capital going into small and medium enterprises, which is calling out the need for nutrition, that's going to be game changing. We don't see that. We looked at 100 agri-food funds last year in Africa. 4 called for nutrition outcomes. 96 did not. Now, it doesn't mean that those other 96 are, producing some kind of unhealthy foods, but some of them are. So I think we absolutely have to tie nutrition. Whenever we're talking about food investments, it can't just be about livelihoods or quantity of food. It has to be about nutrition. Then when we look at the large companies, especially the publicly listed ones, again, we need to ensure that food and beverage companies are held to account, and that if they're producing foods, that the investors in those food companies require them to disclose information on the healthiness of their sales. We're starting to see this. We would love to see ESG, environment, social governance, investing guidelines, and even mandates require this. And we're talking to ISSB about this now, and we're optimistic we can actually get a nutrition indicator embedded within ESG investment frameworks, which would be amazing. And then the third one is government. And this one, I'm not pointing a finger at any one government, but there are, by some accounts, up to $800 billion in subsidies, which are going to the wrong agricultural commodities by many accounts. Sugar is the obvious one. Why are we subsidizing sugar globally, making that such a cheap ingredient that can be used by small enterprises and large enterprises to add too much into that product? Why not stop that subsidy and make sure you're subsidizing healthy foods, and then you tax in a smart way? You actually tax the company, not the consumer, when they're producing an unhealthy food product. I think if governments would step up and start to leverage fiscal policies in the right way, we would see this whole thing shift in the right direction.
Thank you. It's you're tackling a very challenging topic overall, and I think it expresses itself differently in different markets. And you brought up the topic of financing. It's a question. It's related, not completely, but it's related. And Brio, I'm going to come to you here. Obviously, you're representing a country that invests heavily in aid around the world in many different shapes and forms. But we know that when we talk about malnutrition, we often tend to go immediately to developing, or I hate to use it, third world countries, where undernutrition is very high. But malnutrition exists on our own doorsteps in every single country in the world, no matter how much, how high the quality of life and living is. So this is a problem with double-edged sword in every market we are in every country we live and work in. How do we address both of these at the same time?
Whoa, how much time do I have for that?
I'll give you 1 minute.
That's a real issue. I mean, yes, malnutrition affects everyone. I mean, but there are countries which are more affected than others. So I would say, like, this is like the animal farm story. we are trying to deal with. I was in Madagascar a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and clearly you can see that this malnutrition there is really a scourge that is affecting the country and hitting it really badly. So this is a triple burden country, dealing with the three main forms of malnutrition. But we also see in the Horn of Africa uh, populations which are affected by severe acute malnutrition, and we know that there are tens of thousands of children who are about to die in the next month of their. So this is really frightening, and there is indeed a necessity to take the necessary measures to, for the sake of humanity, saving them. But you can also look at on the longer term at forms of malnutrition that hinder the possibilities, the potential for development of a country. When you have stunting that is widespread in a country, that that this will affect the country generation after generation. So this is a cycle that we can actually break. Uh, and then comes the issue of obesity and overweight, which is expanding. And despite being a non-communicable disease, we see that it's spreading fast. Uh, Garrett was discussing the issue of sugar, which is the nicotine of the 21st century, and clearly there should be a wake-up call among governments and public opinions. And we see that even in rich countries, you see that in particular, people who are poor are very much affected by malnutrition. We see that in Northern Europe and in Canada, for instance, in the north of the United States, scurvy is coming back. So this proves that there's also the impact of wealth. Uh, Wealth has allowed many countries to extend their life expectancy, their population's life expectancy, and then that requires medicalized attention to people who are growing old, and that comes at a very high cost. In fact, we know that with proper nutrition, there are aging populations that could enjoy a better life, and without representing a financial burden for governments, for the taxpayer. And I think that would make a lot of people happy to know that they can spend more time with their family before they are sent to an elder's house. So there's plenty of actions that can be taken everywhere, and I think what is important is that there is people realize that there's raising awareness that malnutrition is really affecting everyone. And when you deal in these times where public development aid is not that popular, people need to realize that when we deal with malnutrition, we also deal with problems at home. And that implies, accepting a philosophy on what we eat and how we feed ourselves, basically. So yeah, that's how I see it. This is such a wide issue
Mm,
that clearly it requires a strong mobilization of all
mm,
stakeholders.
yeah. And even where I live in Oslo in Norway, and the west of the city is a more affluent population, and they live longer. It's clearly proven they live longer than the east side of the city, but they also have a much higher rate of non-communicable diseases. So it's that's a pattern we're seeing
Mm.
everywhere.
Norge er veldig
Um,
bra. I love Norway. My wife is from Norway.
Very good to know. Thank you. It is a great country. Um, Virginia, World Food Program has been in the world of public-private partnerships for years, and almost led the trailblazed, if I could use that word, against many odds to find ways to harness the benefits of the knowledge, the expertise, the financials, the innovation capabilities, the local presence of private sector, etc., etc. So for World Food Program, it's quite new. Your role, by definition and by title, is about engaging the private sector. So what would you advise to new public-private partnerships that are trying to find their feet and trying to make things work? What would your golden advice be?
Well, the golden advice is believe and dare do it. I think Yannick said, right, be bold. This is worth investing in, and I think I mentioned, right, it makes economic sense. It makes economical sense to actually work on this, and I think Anna talked about it. I gave a couple of figures. It's important. So it's not only good because of the good of the heart of the company. It's actually, it makes economic sense. I think actually, for instance, Novo Nordisk also shows it made economic sense, right? You know, it's a company that is selling medicines for diabetes, and yet is contributing genuinely, and showing also an example of how to change diets, right? So it does make economic sense, and it will have a return on investment in many different ways. So do it, be bold, and then try to do it also maybe the localization part is important. I think Mauro talked about it. I talked about it. It's very important to try to do it as much as possible, so to support the local partnerships. That doesn't mean that it has to be only local partners, but you can also do it, you know, specifically. Then work with the different partners. I'm happy and very pleased to know we work together with a set of people that are the speakers here, and we need to work together, and we should not be in this for the competition. It really this idea of collaboration is not only an idea. For instance, we have one project in which we go in the Sahel. We work with 58 partners. It's difficult, but it is essential, right? And then, you know, don't expect the public sector to actually do it all, because, you know, as I mentioned, the Novo Nordisk partnership, because it's actually they brought in the Danish government with them, right? And I think also with DSM here, we have a fantastic examples of also where we have brought the government with us as well in different ways. So don't wait for that public partner to do it. And then, you know, we were talking about PPPs. Yannick was talking about adding another P. The public-private philanthropy partnership. So if we add another P, you know, the philanthropy part, SIF, for instance, here, okay, there are so many of these, even philanthropies in itself, you know, only individuals have played a role. And I think it's very important to try to work also in this systems approach. I said multi-sectoral, because sometimes you have a donor that might come in, you know, a family office that says, I just want to do this a small thing, and that's a pilot, right? Then you prove the concept. I think, you know, like the SIFs or Glades or so on, they have a little bit of the funding, and they dare also test and risk. They have a bit more risk appetite to do that and say, I'm going to test the model, and then we have to scale it up, you know, in different ways. And there's maybe where the public money can come in, maybe also World Bank or international financial institutions, so that a PPP is not for one project only and a PPPP, but we actually bring the added value of each of us at some point in time, right?
Yeah.
Our added value as a World Food Program is we can work at the scale. We work for 60 years with 120 governments. We work in very fragile context as well. And, you know, we have the trust of the government. We also have a lot of data and ground truth data that we can actually do more with. And so, you know, we bring this to the table. Others bring the expertise. Also, they bring the risk appetite, or maybe the capacity of funding, or maybe, and then also don't discourage if you don't have it. We need expertise. We need advocacy. We need communication. We need money. Everyone can bring something, and we need the specific role of each other.
Well, thank you. It actually, you made me think of something, which is, and it was a question from one of the audience, which I want to leverage because it was highlighted by one of you as well. Technology and innovation is racing progress forward in many different sectors and many different, I would say, challenges that we're facing globally. Mauro, maybe this is a question for you, and I don't know if First Food Africa is the example, but how can we better leverage the potential that technology is serving us, because it is available everywhere. It's moving faster than we can almost keep up with. How could that help us address this topic of making nutrition everybody's business in a better, more effective way?
Yeah, thank you very much, Anthony. And of course, technology is a great enabler that we need to invest in to make sure that we have the necessary tools to produce good quality foods at also at an affordable and a sustainable price. There are new technologies, for example, for the development of food supplements or ready-to-use therapeutic foods that help to keep the nutritional value of the ingredients and also use new ingredients that are also locally available. So in this case, technology like the use of extrusion, for example, in the manufacturing of ready-to-use therapeutic food or lipid based supplements is a very interesting innovation that it is being explored, as well as using locally available ingredients like chickpeas or soy to bring the proteins that children need, especially when they are in situation of vulnerability. But I believe that innovation and technology, they don't always need to be together, because sometimes we think that innovation should only be related to technology, but actually innovation is also the ability to simplify some of the processes and also to get new solutions. For me, the innovation that we need now is to make sure that there is not a dichotomy between what is a good business and a profitable business and what is a good food, a nutritious, safe, affordable, and sustainable food that is good for children and the planet. So at the moment, if we look also at the international trade agreements, the conception of foods there is like a value for profit. There is not really a push to look at food also in its acception of something that is needed for well-being and for human rights. So I think it is very important to bring to the table, to maintain to the table the profit part, because the profit is the engine of the well-being and of the economy. But to bring to the table the dimension that healthy, sustainable food are also good for profit. And this is what we're trying and work with investors. And there is more and more out there that for a sustainable and local solution, so that these foods that are good for children and the planet become also good for business.
And that actually, I want to stick on this one more time, because I do believe that innovation is at the heart of companies' success. As you say, you have to continue growing. You have to be able to find a way to cover your costs and turn a profit, no matter who your shareholders are. So, Anna, I know that SIF invests heavily and believes a lot in innovation and technology, and you spoke a little bit about it in the beginning. Is this something that you've seen in one of the markets where you're actively working and investing, where you're really excited, an innovation or a technology that might be quite unique in addressing nutrition through partnership?
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. And technology is obviously quite an catch-all, encompassing word, and we're really looking for solutions to be fit for purpose. And and there's a spectrum for technology in terms of high tech, mid, and low tech. So we have initiatives and projects that excite us all across that spectrum. When it comes for technology, maybe I'll touch upon some of the things we're also looking in terms of in the space of AI and and digital technologies. For example, we're working with some partners to really see how we can use AI and digital for better diagnostics of nutrition conditions, including stunting and wasting. As we know, manual measurement of some of these anthropometric measures sometimes entails a high degree of human error, and automation does provide opportunities for higher accuracy and also time efficiency. And there's already some, promising sort of innovations bordering feasibility for scale, so not very early stage R&D as well. It's more training the data sets and sort of verifying the accuracies there, for example, for using kind of imagery and training AI to really do the diagnostic. So that's for us is quite exciting. But again, all of these innovations in themselves are not enough. They need to be built into a functional, health service provision at a country level. And this is where also the whole the topic that we started touching upon of integration into existing systems comes to play. So the platforms being either CHW platforms, or if it is a facility level service, for example, ANC and others, it's so important that we, and some of my colleagues talked about it today as well, look at system strengthening as a whole, and not just only vertical interventions into particular, products or particular pockets of nutrition, but really how do we strengthen the system to deliver health and nutrition is going to be really critical. And what we're seeing, those are actually the parts that are most vulnerable to the aid cuts and the shrinking space. Because in one way or another, while product is super important, and we are ourselves supporting a lot of product innovations, don't get me wrong at all, but it is a space where it is a bit more tangible, and there's different players, there's private sector, there's philanthropy and others. It might be easier to preserve, whereas I think with service provision and system strengthening, it's hard to find sometimes very obvious hosts and champions of this. It is so critical and so foundational to delivery of the outcomes.
I think there's still huge room for us to harness innovations. As you say, it's moving faster than we can even almost keep up with. And I think, given that we've only got 5 minutes left, what I'm going to propose we do is pull our focus towards N4G. We have a very important representative from N4G Paris, Brieux, that's you. I'm going to let you make some closing remarks before I'll wrap up the session. But given what we're trying to commit towards at the end of this month, bringing multiple sectors together, what are some of the closing key messages you want to leave us with?
Well, for starters, thank you very much for all the very valuable insights that we got today. I think they set the tone for very rich collaborations. It's fundamental, it's crucial that we bring all stakeholders around this table to foster meaningful partnerships to tackle malnutrition. So that's the purpose of N4G. Our summit needs to be, we want our summit to be a summit of chemistry where people can connect, and so that it's a key moment for, to talk about nutrition, about solutions as well. You might be surprised to hear that, but in fact, this summit on nutrition is not on nutrition, or at least on what people think nutrition is. It's about climate change, it's about agriculture, it's about sustainable food systems, it's about artificial intelligence. So there's plenty of, again, areas of expertise and ideas to bring to Paris. And it will be a milestone to really find our development priorities and how we craft development policy in the 2030 in the post 2030 era. So working together is key. We must not work in silos. We need to break silos, and sharing our mutual expertise is really essential. So I look forward to welcoming you, everyone, all of you in Paris, not only at the summit itself, but also at the Village of Solutions and at the about 50-ish side events that are being organized the week of March 24th, from March 24th to March 28th, by all types of stakeholders. And all information on the village on these side events is available on nutritionforgrowth.org website. So I encourage you to take a look at it. And the information is updated on a daily basis. So, well, thank you very much, dsm-firmenich, for hosting this seminar. And, see you all in Paris then in about 16 days now.
Yeah. No pressure for you and your team, I'm sure.
No pressure.
But it's a really good point. The website is updated on a very regular basis. I've checked it a couple of times over the last few weeks, and it comes with more information, including some very interesting position papers on some of the big topics that are going to be addressed there. And as we conclude, I think one thing for me is super clear, having listened to everybody. Malnutrition in all its forms remains a massive challenge that you just can't solve from one side at all. It does require bold leadership. I think those speakers that are here today are examples of bold leadership. In other words, doing things that are not easy, doing things that require innovation, that require courage, that require doing things, I would say, differently to how we've done them before, but collaborating responsibly. I think that everybody has shared some really interesting insights on how we can transform food systems, scale nutrition solutions, drive a really strong impact. But of course, talk alone is cheap, as they say, and the proof is in the action. Even at N4G later on this month, that is going to be about commitment, and it is meant to be a reignition towards, again, action and real impact. Businesses need to be involved. They need to embed nutrition into their core strategies. They need to walk the talk. Policymakers need to try to create an enabling environment that really fosters this collaboration, holds the players accountable. Government bodies, NGOs, aid agencies are looking to bridge these gaps between research and implementation, drive advocacy. And of course, for all of us, we have to stay accountable to these commitments that we're making, because if nutrition doesn't become a permanent priority in global development, we will never be able to unleash both its capabilities, but also the capabilities it unfolds in all the other SDGs that remain, by the way, a priority. It's already 2025. The SDGs are up until 2030. We had a 15-year horizon. Now we only have 5. And we are still in a very, very difficult place. So I think this opportunity now that we have continues to press on the importance of working together in a responsible way to really allow nutrition to do what it does. So I want to personally thank our wonderful panel for the work that you personally do and the energy that you bring. I think you are driving this very much within your organizations and across many, many different platforms that you have to work in. It is a very complex space. We know that, and we're grateful to you for constantly driving that. I'm sure we'll see many of you later on in the month. And for those of you that are listening, I hope that it's been interesting and thought-provoking for you. Do check out the websites of the organizations that have been here. You'll be very impressed with the work that they're doing. And this will not be the last time. I'm sure we will be talking about this and addressing this topic again many times. So thank you all for joining, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you all. Goodbye.